Russian and foreign media. We will begin with the relevant international agenda. Today, on October the 30th, Samarkand will host the opening of the 43rd session of the UNESCO General Conference. The delegation of the Russian Federation will be headed by Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs Alexander Pankin. On October 31st, State Secretary, Deputy Minister of Education of the Russian Federation Korneev will take part in the high-level ministerial segment on education issues. On November 6th, the General Conference is to approve the election of the Egyptian Al Anani by the UNESCO Executive Board to the post of Director General of the organization for the period 2025-2029. Elections to the governing and subsidiary bodies of UNESCO will be held. Russia is a candidate for a seat on the Executive Board for the period 2025-2029. The member states are to approve the draft program and strategy of UNESCO on the integration of persons with disabilities for 2026-2029. Among other issues in the focus of the General Conference's attention will be the problems of artificial intelligence and open science, ethical aspects of neurotechnology, the fight against discrimination in education, and the implementation of the 2017 recommendation on scientific researchers. On the sidelines of the General Conference, 2 Russian events are planned: a roundtable on issues of scientific diplomacy. Organizer will be the Russian Association for the Promotion of Science, and a photo exhibition dedicated to UNESCO Global Geoparks, organized by the All-Russian Scientific Research Geological Institute, named after Karpinski. Now we proceed to the situation around Ukraine. The Kiev Nazi regime continues to attack. During the recent week, 113 Russian citizens suffered. 94 were damaged, including 10 children. Some examples: in Belgorod region, as a result of massive drone strikes in the villages of Streletsky, Yasny Zori, Goropodol, Zamostye, and the settlement of Maisky, at least 20 civilians were injured, including a 12-year-old boy, 2 girls aged 17 and 23, and 2 young men aged 16 and 17. On October 24 of this year, during the shelling of the village of Grifovka, a man was wounded. And from UAV raids in the city of Belgorod and the settlement of Oktyabrski, 3 women. On October 26 of this year, as a result of strikes by Ukronazis on populated areas of the Belgorod region, 1 civilian was killed and 23 people were injured, including 2 children. On October 25-26 of this year, as a result of several deliberate attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces using American HIMARS, the buildings and the hydraulic gate of the Belgorod Reservoir Dam were damaged. The strikes were also carried out with the help of drones, which were used to increase the scale of the damage and to attack the repair crews strengthening the dam. The enemy does not hide its plans to arrange a man-made disaster in order to slow down the advance of Russian troops in the area of Volchansk and the Kharkiv Oblast by flooding populated areas along the banks of Seversky Donetsk River. The militants of Ukrainian armed forces acted according to the same scenario when they destroyed the dam of the Kakhovska hydraulic power plant in June 2023. On October 26 of this year, as a result of kamikaze drone strikes on the villages of Kurov and Varenok and the village of Bugaevka, including on civilian vehicles, 4 people were injured. On October 27 of this year, in the settlement of Pogar, as a result of UAV attacks on 5 civilian vehicles, the driver of a minibus was killed and 13 people were wounded. On October 28th of this year, near Pogar, a car was again attacked by drones. 1 person was wounded. On the same day, as a result of a UAV strike in the Vogonishki district, a female civilian was killed, a 14-year-old girl was injured. And between the villages of Kurov and Suvorova, a civilian traveling in a car was killed. In Voronezh Oblast, on October 22 this year, a kamikaze drone raid by the AFU on the village of Andreykovichy led to the death of a local resident, and another person was wounded. On October 23rd, as a result of a drone strike on the civilian vehicle in the village of Novoyurkovichy, a woman was killed. On the night of October 26, as a result of the shelling of the city of Yasenovata by Ukrainian armed forces using HIMARS, a family was killed, a girl born in 2012 and her parents, on the night of October 27 of this year as a result of UAV attack on residential buildings in Donetsk. Women born in 1927 and 1953 were killed, and a girl born in 2006 was injured in Moscow Oblast on the night of October 24th as a result of a Ukrainian UAV hit in a residential apartment building in Krasnogorsk. 5 civilians were seriously injured, including a boy born in 2017. In Kherson Oblast on October 26 of this year, as a result of targeted shelling by the AFU of the city of Elashki, 4 civilians were killed on October 26 of this year in the village of Novaya Zbruvka. An enemy drone attacked an ambulance that was on its way to a patient. Fortunately, there were no casualties. Of course, they will be punished for this. Russian courts continue to pass sentences on Ukrainian neo-Nazis. A mercenary from Lithuania, Pavelas Adomas Limantas, who participated in hostilities on the side of Ukraine, was sentenced in absentia to 6.5 years in prison. He has been placed on an international wanted list. Criminal cases have been sent to court against legionnaires who fought as part of the AFU from Colombia, Sweden, and Japan. And yet, Kevin Javier Ramirez, Eric Victor Hall, and Takao Tainaki, all 3 have been placed on the international wanted list. On October 23rd this year now, a few words regarding those who sponsor all of this and who pay for this bloody banquet the Ukrainian armed forces organize against civilians. So, on October 23rd, a meeting of the European Council was held in Brussels with the participation of Vladimir Zelensky, at which issues of continuing support for the Ukrainian project. Essentially, they miss the project of ending, putting an end to Ukraine, exterminating Ukraine, because what is being done now by the West towards the population of this country, towards the citizens of this country. I don't even mention the territorial integrity, economy, statehood. What they are doing with Ukraine can be called nothing but extermination of Ukraine. They represent it as the implementation of a noble goal from the point of view of NATO, of containing Russia, as they call it, of strategically defeating Russia. The focus of attention was a brainstorm regarding the direction of a reparation credit of 140 billion euros to Kyiv at the expense of Russian assets stolen by Brussels. There are apparently no other sources left, and the friends of Zelensky are clearly not eager to transfer funds from their own leaky budgets for the cause of defending Europe until the last Ukrainians left standing. However, the EU members could not agree on the legalization of the theft of our assets. In this regard, the local publications operating in the European Union mentioned that if you managed to hide the fact that the outcome of the discussion, here is the quote, again raises questions about the fragile support for Ukraine from the European Union. In turn, Vladimir Zelensky, not worrying about the legal and reputational consequences for the Europeans from the encroachment on Russian property, traditionally begged for more weapons and money. He repeated the tired cliches about the inadmissibility, as he put it, of territorial concessions. He announced alleged ongoing negotiations with Europeans on possible supplies of long-range weapons to Kyiv, including Tomahawks. In this context, attention was drawn to the calculations and assessments of the Kiel Institute for the World Economy, according to which Kyiv annually requires around 80 billion euros to keep its pants on, literally. On the average monthly volume of support for Ukraine by Europeans in July-August of this year fell by 43% compared to the first half of 2025, taking into account their contribution to the initiative to purchase American weapons as part of ensuring the priority needs of Ukraine. In Western expert circles, it is believed that in reality the volume of assistance has decreased by 57%. And here we also received some Curious news. On October 22nd of this year, Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson and Vladimir Zelensky signed a declaration of intent, which includes the supply of modified Swedish Jas Gripen E-fighters to Ukraine. They were talking about 150 aircraft. Their cost is estimated by experts at approximately $10 billion. The preparation of this deal should take at least 3 years, and its subsequent implementation from 10 to 15 years. Vladimir Zelensky at the same time voiced his wish to receive the first batch of aircraft as early as next year. The so-called Democratic Stockholm plans to partially cover the payment for the supply by using frozen Russian assets. Such a scheme was allowed on October 23rd of this year in an interview with the SVT television channel by Swedish Defense Minister Paul Jansson. Obviously, perfectly understanding the inevitability of the collapse of the Kiev regime, the Swedish ruling elite decided to squeeze the last dividends from the Ukraine project. The West closes up Ukraine, that's how it should be called, on the eve of the parliamentary elections in this country scheduled for September 26. At the same time, they are going to make some money. And this is what the situation with the human rights is like in the West. And this is how they care about civilians, children, and others. They forgot everything. At one moment, when they saw this amount of money they could pocket. History, as is known, repeats itself. The family of Swedish military-industrial magnates, the Wallenbergs, during the Second World War did not hesitate to profit from the supply of strategic products from formerly neutral Sweden to fascist Germany. Did Sweden forgot about this? Let us remember what you were doing 80 years ago. The current generation of Wallenbergs is going to extract benefits from the Ukrainian crisis and dreams of participating in the division of sovereign Russian assets blocked by the Europeans. This is nothing but the Swedish business supporting neo-Nazism. Moreover, Sweden officially participates in funding the terrorist group and the killing of civilians. And no one will ever forget this. On October 24th of this year, another conference of the member countries of the Coalition of the Willing was held in London. Well, now everyone understands the meaning of the phrase Coalition of the Willing. Yes, exactly. These are this very regimes who became very enthusiastic and eager when they realized that they can make some money at this very point of the Zelensky regime, which is at the point of its extinction. And this deal cannot be further implemented because they are no longer going to be accountable before Zelensky, but they will be able to put the money and the funds into their pockets. These are the members of this Coalition of the Willing. So this conference took place at the top level. It was co-chaired by Britain and France. However, it was not possible to convene a full-format summit. Many participants, including one of the co-chairs of the event, French President Macron, joined remotely. The hosts of the meeting gave a demonstratively warm welcome to the regular of such gatherings. Vladimir Zelensky could not miss such an opportunity. He was received personally at Windsor Castle by King Charles III with a salute and the inspection of the guards. There was an impression that those were some leftovers from the Trump visit. Apparently, being impressed by all this, the head of the Kiev regime launched into verbiage on the topic of endless terror and ruthless strikes by Russia on the Ukrainian energy system. But there was the slip of the tongue. He also thanked the sponsors for the promises of financial support, but he forgot to mention in London where this money goes and how many children died that are allegedly cared about, due to the reason that those so-called democratic states arm Ukraine and arm Zelensky, send more and more money to Ukraine, to Zelensky. They also provide political assistance. They do this rigorously without consideration to their own principles. Also, Zelensky spoke in favor of a more substantive diplomacy, which in his view would be realized through political pressure, sanctions, and the supply of long-range weapons to the AFU. I do not know where this diplomacy comes from. I understand that these are empty words for him. I'm just curious. Following the meeting, British Prime Minister Starmer, Macron and Zelensky signed a joint statement which outlined the priority task until the end of the current year. Among them are building up the graduation supply of military products to Ukraine, strengthening its air defense systems, completing negotiations of the use of frozen, in essence stolen Russian assets for the further support of Kiev regime, and continuing work on security guarantees, including the parameters for the deployment of so-called multinational forces in Ukraine after the end of hostilities. And they had a great opportunity of making up things and fancies. But they have no soul in the common understanding of the world. As the discussions in London showed, the coalition of the willing is increasingly shifting the focus of its attention from purely military assistance to the topics of using financial and economic levers of pressure on Russia. Experts rightly noted that the attempts of the willing to find ways to help Vladimir Zelensky and at the same time to profit from the immobilized Russian assets and the income from them prove that the resources of the European sponsors of the Kiev regime are running out. This is also confirmed by the discussion that has begun among the generous allies of the idea to lay a hand on private assets of Russian origin in the amount of about 25 billion euros frozen in European banks. Against this background, Russia's objective approaches to resolving the Ukrainian crisis on the basis of eliminating its root causes are meeting with ever wider understanding from foreign leaders and politicians. Support for our peaceful aspirations is invariably expressed by colleagues from the countries of the global South and East. Increasingly clear are the just reproaches addressed to the European Union countries which are preventing the negotiation process and contributing in every possible way to the escalation of the conflict. With similar condemnation addressed to those Eurohawks, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban and member of the U.S. House of Representatives Anna Paulina Luna have spoken out in recent days, including other public figures. And speaking about historical facts, on October the 28th, we marked the 81st anniversary of the liberation of Soviet Ukraine from the German fascist invaders was celebrated. It became possible as a result of one of the landmark battles of the Great Patriotic War, the Carpathian-Uzhgorod offensive operation of the Red Army. It was carried out in the period from September 9 to October 28, 1944, and became part of the East Carpathian strategic campaign. This was preceded by the liberation of the western regions of the Ukrainian Soviet Republic, where together with the Hitlerites, their henchmen from the 40th Ukrainian SS Infantry Division Galichina were utterly defeated. In 1944, our army reached the pre-war borders of the Soviet Union and moved on to battles in the impassable Carpathian forests, ensuring the liberation of the territory of Subcarpathian Rus, now the Zakarpattia Oblast, from forces allied with the Nazis. In heavy battles, the troops at the 4th Ukrainian Front, under the command of Colonel General and by the end of the operational Writer General of the Army, Ivan Petrov, captured the key cities of Transcarpathia, Uzhgorod, Mukachevo, Chop, and their surroundings. Today, the neo-Nazi Kiev regime is trying with all its might to erase the memory of the liberation of the region and all of Ukraine from the fascist invaders. This regime demolishes monuments and memorials to the soldiers of the Red Army, glorifies the Hitler soldiers and the puppets from among the Ukrainian nationalists. For example, in Odessa, a street named after the aforementioned General Petrov in 2024, without any consideration for the opinion of the Odessa residents, was named after one of the militants of the neo-Nazi Azov regiment.
Recognized this terrorist organization in Russia and killed in Mariupol fighting in March 2022. You should remember that manipulating history is fraught with serious consequences, namely the repetition of these lessons. As the Ukrainian experience testifies, attempts by the Kiev regime to impose distorted historical interpretation invariably lead to tragic consequences. They face not only internal rejection within the society, but also the determination of civilized countries to defend the truth about the Second World War and the Great Patriotic War. I strongly recommend that you familiarize yourself with the archival materials recently declassified by the Russian FSB concerning the atrocities committed by Bandera's followers in Western Ukraine during the war. You will understand the methods of Ukrainian Nazis, methods of intimidation, combating the civilian population, and many, many other things. We will never forget that during the liberation of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, more than 2.5 even more, 2.5 million Red Army soldiers. During the German fascist occupation, more than 10 million people were killed there, and another 2.5 million were forced into slavery. We will never forget these sacrifices, and we will never allow anyone, everyone else, to forget them. We have repeatedly mentioned that Zelensky deprived of Ukrainian citizenship the mayor of Odessa, Gennady Trukhanov. The pretext was allegedly the Ukrainian citizenship that he kept. Russian citizenship that he kept. The data was provided by Ukrainian Forces General Lysak, and they started fighting memorials, and Trukhanov counted that. A monument to Pushkin was actually closed there, and there is another session of General Conference. This General Conference is, as usual, silent. Maybe when they gather in Samarkand, the representatives of the organization of UNESCO that deals with cultural heritage, they will think about what is happening nearby, actually. We will repeat that fact. We will do our best for official documents about those atrocities to be tabled for the officials who must deal with that, but for some reason they do not deal with that. I would mention Yanina Sokolova, allegedly a journalist, but of course she is actually not a journalist because she is famous for her notorious statements intimidating Ukrainians, starting to frighten them with the consequences regarding their move to new Russian regions. They should just decide for themselves. But she intimidates them. This caring Ukrainian journalist, she has invented that they could be beaten, killed, or forcibly mobilized, as she put it, into the DPR volunteer army. So maybe she has mixed something, confused. Forced mobilization is underway where? In Ukraine, I would remind you. She has just forgotten what is happening in her own country. It's just some gap in her memory. The failed forced mobilization of working age Ukrainians. And she has forgotten to mention the overwhelming corruption, destruction in the Ukraine, also in the context of this failed mobilization and mass repressions against citizens who just demonstrate some smallest attempts to ask a question. based on those arbitrary actions, they observe such personalities are just totally hateful to those who are their compatriots and who they're just trying to finish, to destroy them. And now they're jealous of people building their new life, even those people who are no longer part of Ukraine. Yes, Russia's new regions and other regions of Russia, they suffer from the terrorism of the Kiev regime, but the rate of their development is just cannot be imagined by that Ukrainian dictatorship and its sponsored. Massive construction is underway. Thousands of houses, schools, hospitals and other social sites are being restored. Hundreds of roads and communication sites are being built. Parks, memorials, public spaces are being reconstructed and built. Yes, they are on the front line, they are being shot, but they know they will win. And they know their life will be dignified. And they know they have made the right choice. And the more the Kiev regime shoots them, the more it enshrines in their conscience the knowledge that they are right, that their choice is right. Assistance is provided to families, to elderly people, education is developed. In Donbass and Novorossiysk, the residents are confident in their prosperous future despite all the difficulties. It cannot be said today about common Ukrainians, whom the Zelensky regime has literally sentenced to being expendable for his interests. The Ukrainians are just purifying, cleansing the territories from their own population, torture, kill civilians, unarmed civilians, those who they call their compatriots. The mentioned facts, of course, confirm the relevance of the tasks of denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine and the elimination of threats from its territory. All these goals, as repeatedly mentioned by Russian leadership, will be achieved. The neighboring Moldova. We have repeatedly highlighted the alarming trends in this country, the glorification of Nazi collaborators and downplaying the heroic feat of the Red Army soldiers who have sacrificed their lives to free the Republic from German Nazi invaders. Romanian Nazi collaborators are honored, the Georgian ribbon is banned, the broadcasting of patriotic films is banned, and it is also obvious in the school program there is a textbook that is called The History of Romanians and World History for the 12th grade students. It extols the dictatorial regime of Ion Antonescu and the so-called noble goals regarding Moldova, while the Soviet Union is baselessly accused of expansionist aspirations. A widespread negative reaction in Moldova was sparked by the order published on the 9th of October by the Ministry of Culture. I will quote: "The instruction on the procedure for the erection, relocation and dismantling of monuments in public places." According to this document, the demolition of monuments is possible if they, quotation, promote a hostile, defamatory or derogatory attitude towards national spiritual values and or significant events in national history. But actually the Moldovans did not believe that. As They know how they are treated now, how they are deceived now. The regime does its best to cancel the national identity of the Moldovans. We have repeatedly mentioned it, but I will quote some more examples. In the villages of Gilichene in the Teleneshte district, Zaim in Kaushene district, and Teleshenti in Hineste district, 3 cemeteries of so-called Romanian heroes who fought in the ranks of Hitler's collaborator Ion Antonescu were opened. An act of vandalism was recorded on the 22nd of October in Chisinau with regard to the inscription on the building of the National Children's Library named after Krange. It was made to honor the Soviet soldiers who liberated the Moldovan capital from Romanian and Nazi occupation. Unknown people just tore away the protective glass and painted the inscription with white paint. There was no official reaction from the authorities. However, the citizens of Moldova, they registered a petition on the necessity to restore the historical inscription. And I would like to also to quote the Agency for Military Science and member of Moldova hosted the opening of the exhibition, quotation, Outstanding Romanian Personalities in Bessarabia 1918-1944. These, so to say, personalities include recipients of Nazi German orders. So where is Israel now that is so vehemently fighting the Holocaust? They collaborated the criminal in the Holocaust. As they say, disrespect to victims of the Holocaust. Some dance, some song. So what dances and songs do you mean? Monuments are being erected to those who have destroyed the Jews during the Second World War. Monuments are being erected to Romanian collaborators of the Third Reich. Monuments are being erected to those who have preached hatred based on racial and national grounds. Where are all those who annually, several times, mark the International Day established by the UN General Assembly and all other memorable dates connected with the Holocaust? Where are all those people? Or is it not about the Holocaust? Should the Holocaust be remembered in some other formats? That is the Holocaust that was in place, among others, on the territory where the Romanian collaborators operated. But everyone keeps silence. I would like to ask, why are you silent? As the exhibition I have mentioned is dedicated to those who ordered to kill and torture civilians living on the Moldovan land of all nationalities. Just have a look. Again, Russia is making this statement. Russia calls upon everyone, actively calls upon everyone. Where is everyone? The Moldovan collaborators having operated on the territory of Moldova, killing people of different nationalities. It's obvious that the attempts by official Chisinau to rewrite history are a manifestation of its barbaric attitude to the history of the Republic of Moldova. The Moldovan people have already provided a strictly negative assessment of this policy. It's a shame that the country's authorities remain indifferent to their opinion, but the modern Moldovan authorities, they are just conducting the anti-Moldovan ideology and policy. But actually, about those usually remains in the shadow. We have drawn attention to Keith Clarenberg published material. He cites declassified CIA data on collaborators, Nazi collaborators and participants in the Holocaust on the territory of Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia after the end of the Second World War. It's inhumane methods of MI6 aiding those collaborators. It's supplies of weapons and explosives, sponsoring murders and terrorist attacks, intimidating the civilian population. These methods are actually at the ready in London for those who do not agree with the neo-colonial thinking and practices. It's just an illness of the British political class that is incurable and just provides increasingly scary effects across all the society. Just patronizing the neo-Nazi Zelensky regime. But the methods of support they just remain the same as they used to be. Acts of sabotage, weapons and equipment shipments, attacks on the civilian population, lies, stagings, and just the English, they offer the corruption, the Kiev regime mired in corruption to just continue their hostilities until the last Ukrainian. And just remember actions by Boris Johnson giving advice. And they should not forget about the lessons of history. Just let us remind them. They consider their sponsors to be just expendable material, which they are ready to easily discard once they have served their purpose. And one more, Keith Clarenberg, one more quotation from Keith Clarenberg material. The Forest brothers were destroyed, and that is the fate awaiting other destructive projects by London. I would like to mention the Israeli Parliament, the Knesset, approving in preliminary reading the draft on the annexation of the West Bank territories.
Both documents were introduced by opposition deputies, and in accordance with the current regulations, they have 3 more readings ahead of them. The Office of the Prime Minister of Israel called this step a deliberate political provocation on the part of political opponents, and Netanyahu himself instructed the members of the ruling coalition, this is the direct quote, to suspend the promotion of the draft laws until further notice, end of quote. We hope that the matter will not come to the final approval of the draft laws, otherwise it will not be possible to avoid a new dangerous escalation of tension both in the occupied Palestinian territory and in the Middle East region as a whole, and the international peacekeeping efforts promoted with considerable difficulty and aimed at reducing confrontation will be undermined and thrown far back. We emphasize once again that a solution to the Palestinian problem can be achieved only through political and diplomatic means. We see the main task today in ensuring sustainable peace in the region and creating the necessary conditions for establishing direct negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis on all issues of final status. Their logical outcome is intended to be the creation of an independent, territorially integral Palestinian state coexisting in peace and harmony with Israel. Just recently, the General Assembly of the United Nations voted on the so-called anti-Cuba policy of the United States against Cuba. We welcome the almost unanimous adoption by the 80th session of the UN General Assembly on October 29th of this year of the annually submitted by Havana resolution, necessity of ending the economic, commercial and financial embargo imposed by the United States of America against Cuba. 165 states voted for it, 7 voted against and 12 abstained. Russia, in its traditional vein, actively supported this this document and made a corresponding statement during its consideration. The adoption of this resolution once again demonstrated the decisive condemnation by practically the entire world community of Washington's unilateral restrictive measures against Havana, which grossly violate the fundamental principles and norms of international law and prevent Cuba's full participation in international and regional cooperation, and also encroach on the inalienable right of Cuban citizens to a dignified life. The American blockade of the Island of Freedom is a long-standing sanctions war unleashed by the United States against Cuba to achieve its main goal, the overthrow of the government it dislikes, and is a vivid example of treacherous interference in the internal affairs of an independent state. It is no secret to anyone that these illegal unilateral restrictive measures are designed, among other things, to intimidate other states that would like to develop mutually beneficial cooperation with Cuba. The economy of the island is suffering colossal losses from the American embargo from March 2024 to February 2025. The damage caused to it by the blockade increased by 49% compared to the previous similar period and amounted to more than $7.5 billion US, exceeding the huge damage caused to the country in 2023 by $2.5 billion US. The total losses for the entire history of the embargo have reached more than $170 billion US. If not for the blockade, Cuba's GDP could have grown in 2024-2025 by 9.2%, which is one of the highest growth rates in the Western Hemisphere. All this affects the well-being of Cuban citizens, representing a major barrier to the full realization of human rights in Cuba, primarily in the areas of healthcare, education, energy, and food security. We are confident that the fraternal Cuban people, despite all of Washington's efforts, will continue to courageously and cohesively resist the challenge. In connection with the actions of the U.S. aimed at tightening economic pressure on Havana, we reaffirm our position in favor of the immediate exclusion of Cuba from the odious American list of state sponsors of terrorism. This country has an impeccable reputation as an active participant in international cooperation in countering terrorism. Guided by the fundamental principles of the United Nations Charter, we will continue to advocate, together with the world majority, for the complete and unconditional lifting of the embargo, as well as against the preservation of Cuba on the specified list of states. We will continue to provide support in the struggle of the leadership and the fraternal people of Cuba in the name of protecting state sovereignty and to consistently strengthen the Russian-Cuban strategic partnership in the widest range of areas in accordance with the agreements reached during the talks held in May of this year between the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, and the President of the Republic of Cuba. Yesterday, Pochta Russia, on October the 29th, issued the postal marks depicting the consulate generals in Istanbul, the diplomatic missions in Uruguay, and others. All these buildings which are depicted on these stamps represent the historical value, and they all are together issued with Marco since 2023. The history of the Russian embassy in Berlin dates back to early 18th century during Second World War. This building was demolished afterwards. Another building was erected. It was solemnly opened in 1852. The embassy of Russia in Uruguay, located on the Boulevard of Spain, is a classic example of the architecture of its time, and this building is an integral part of the cultural landscape of Montevideo. The Consulate General's office was built in 1845 in Istanbul. This is the palace which became the symbol of the imperial power and the symbol of friendship between the two maritime states. On October the 29th, the Municipal BRICS Forum started its work. It brought together many guests and partner states of the association. The opening ceremony and plenary session were attended by the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sherpa of Russian BRICS, Sergei Ryabkov. In recent years, conditions have been developing for an increasingly active development of interaction with foreign countries at the inter-regional and intermunicipal levels. Joint initiatives of our regions contribute to the preservation of historically established and the establishment of new ties and supplement the agenda of interstate relations with relevant content. We consider international cooperation at the local level as a valuable instrument for ensuring the foreign policy interests of our country. That is why the BRICS International Municipal Forum is a key platform for the exchange of experience and best practices in the field of local self-government among the participating countries, where representatives of municipalities can share successful practices and find joint solutions to common problems in the field of sustainable urban development, digitalization of municipal services, and improving the quality of life of citizens. By tradition, the event is held in St. Petersburg, which is one of the leaders in the numbers of external ties. More than 100 agreements on cooperation with municipal entities of foreign states, including with the BRICS member countries. Their number is steadily growing. New agreements are being concluded with states that are friendly or constructively disposed towards Russia, and corresponding roadmaps for their implementation are being developed. On the sidelines of the forum, the second module of the International School of Municipal Leadership will be held, organized with the assistance of the administration of the President of the Russian Federation and Gimao University, within which topical issues of the development and coordination of interregional and intermunicipal ties, project cooperation, attracting investment, and strengthening contacts with regions of friendly countries will be discussed. The first module was successfully held in September of this year with the active participation of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We are confident that within the framework of the next BRICS International Municipal Forum, joint initiatives and projects will be developed. 205 years ago, on October 25, November the 6th New Style, in 1820, Emperor Alexander I approved the statute for the consuls of His Imperial Majesty residing in Europe and America, which for the first time in the history of Russia systematized and detailed the activities of Russian consuls abroad. The need to develop a normative act that replaced the previously existing disparate instructions and directives arose in connection with the active expansion of the Russian consular presence abroad during the turbulent period of the Napoleonic Wars and after their end. The main tasks of the consul, who at the time was subordinate jointly to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Foreign Trade, were to ensure compliance with, I quote, the rights and benefits of the Russian people in general in trade and navigation, unquote, as well as to resolve trade disputes between Russian merchants who were on the territory of the consular district. The consul exercised control over merchant shipping, registered ships sailing under the Russian flag, checked and issued ship documents, resolved disputes, investigated shipwrecks, and sanctioned deals for the sale of Russian ships. He also collected and regularly sent to the center systematized information on the state of trade and economic relations with the host country. The duties of the consul included providing comprehensive assistance to compatriots, primarily from among merchants and seafarers, which included both consulting and legal support as well as direct care for their well-being. For example, he was obliged to facilitate the provision of quality medical services to them. The consul issued passports and certificates of registration of civil status acts to Russian subjects, performed notarial acts, carried out the legalization of documents, established guardianship over children left without parental care, took measures to protect inherited property, and assisted in the return of compatriots to their homeland. The consul services were paid for in accordance with the tariff attached to the statute. For more than 2 centuries, the consular statute has been repeatedly revised and supplemented, while invariably remaining the main source of law for Russian and Soviet consuls. The basic principles and directions of consular activities outlined in the very first statute remain relevant today, having found their reflection in the current federal law of July 5, 2010, entitled Consular Statute of the Russian Federation. One more announcement. From November 4th to November 6th, Doha will host the World Summit for Social Development, second World Summit for Social Development. It will take place there. The event is timed to coincide with the 30th anniversary of the World Summit for Social Development in Copenhagen, which defined the global tasks in the field of poverty eradication, promotion of full and productive employment, and encouragement of social integration. The current summit is intended to play a key role in assessing progress and addressing gaps in the designated areas, as well as in promoting comprehensive approaches focused on people's interests. The political declaration, the adoption of which is intended to be one of the main outcomes of the meeting, is aimed at achieving these goals. The Russian delegation will be headed by the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection of the Russian Federation, Anton Kotikov. It will also include representatives from the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as the All-Russian Union, Federation of Independent Trade Unions of Russia. The Russian side expects a constructive and interested dialogue with the forum participants on the entire spectrum of social development issues. On November 6th and 7th, the annual Yalta International Forum for a Just World Order, New Tasks for Russia and Crimea, will be held in Moscow. The event is organized by the Council of Ministers of the Republic of Crimea for the participation, the permanent representation of the Republic of Crimea under the President of the Russian Federation. The forum's agenda provides for the discussion of topical problems of regional and international development and is focused on solving practical tasks for the further disclosure of the large-scale potential of Crimea and increasing its investment attractiveness. Within the framework of the event, the 10th International Conference Crimea and the Modern International Context, the Russian status of Crimea as an indicator of changes in world politics, a meeting of the International Association of Friends of Crimea, and a session, Economic Partnership of the Republic of Crimea and the Republic of Belarus. Crimea, the southern seagate of the Union State, will be held. Leading experts, scientists, representatives of government bodies and public figures from Russia and foreign countries and members of the International Association of Friends of Crimea will take part in the forum. Now about a very important date. As you know, since 2005, Russia has celebrated National Unity Day on November the 4th. This holiday was established in memory of the liberation of Moscow by the People's Militia from Polish interventions in 1612. It has a deep historical and cultural context, reminding us of the value of unity, the importance of protecting the fatherland, and preserving traditional Russian spiritual and moral values. At all turning points in the thousand-year-rich history of Russia, it was the unity of its people. It was the key to glorious victories, the key component of the successes of the Russian state. Together, we are strong, thanks to the enormous intellectual and creative potential of our people, people who are talented and who love their country, who sincerely wish to bring benefit to their people. On this day, we remember the heroic deeds of our ancestors who united to defend the motherland, regardless of their origin, religion, and social status. We remember those people who demonstrated heroism, courage, and patriotism. This holiday has a special meaning for the participants of the special military operation. Every day, they perform heroic feats in the name of the glory of our fatherland. On behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we know that we do not say and send congratulations in advance, but nevertheless, we always convey our emotions. We always share significant and important words on the eve of such important holidays as the Unity Day. That is why we will do this once again on November the 4th, but I would like to sincerely congratulate our soldiers there at the front line and wish them good luck at their daily heroic deeds, at their very important and dangerous mission. We wish you to come back with a victory, safe and sound. We do love you sincerely. We are with you and you are with us, and we all are together. This is what this holiday, the Unity Day, is about. The world understands
Россия.
Sovereign, strong Russia is the most important factor in the formation of a new multipolar world order reflecting the interests of all mankind, and not just a handful of countries of the Golden Billion, as they call themselves. Our country is always open to cooperate with those who are sincerely interested in doing so. Today, when some are trying to build I do not know, dividing lines, new walls. They are digging pits. We are going to continue to build bridges of cooperation, of mutual understanding, in order to stop this hatred, anti-humane ideology which is now transferred into militarization of the Western geopolitical space. Now let me quote a phrase from Tuchev, Two Unities, 1870. Unity, proclaimed the oracle of our days, can be soldered only with iron and blood, but we will try to solder it with love, and then we will see which is stronger. On the occasion of National Unity Day, a large-scale program of festive events is planned in Russian foreign missions around the world with the participation of Russian compatriots living abroad. What else can I say? I would like to seize this opportunity and to congratulate everyone on the upcoming holiday. We wish you all the best. We congratulate you on the upcoming Unity Day. I am ready to answer your questions.
Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. Hello. At the beginning of the week, Kaja Kallas said that international world order is being attacked. It's a quotation, and that the bloc is considering the options of supporting the International Criminal Court, ICC. It was her statement in a European college in Bruges. Kallas said that there is a wide-scale attack against the international world order, human rights, and norms and institute agreed at international level. Cynical statements. How would you comment on that? You know, I agree. She is right about an attack against global order and human rights, but the head of European diplomacy just skipped one important detail. I have written your quotation, written it down, because the initiator of this attack is actually Brussels, because they challenge the national world order by their desire to unilateral hegemony. It's leading colored revolutions leading to collapse, regime changes, the so-called Maidans. Who was behind that? Who gave the money? Who trained those public representatives, so-called, in Poland, in the Baltic states, in the camps? Who trained them? It was primarily the EU representatives of Obama-Biden administration. So now they are telling that someone is violating international law. It's all written there. What can be done, what cannot be done. They have committed many things that cannot be done according to themselves. It's just strange to hear such things from Kallas, who is inventing illegal schemes to confiscate Russian assets, promoting new packages of illegal anti-Russian sanctions, and this frenzied anti-Russia, Russophobic rhetorics. She does not care about international law, about thousands, millions of people in Europe, in Eurasia. She just does not care. She is indifferent. I do not mention those who is in sanctions list of the European Union. She does not care about human rights. And it's unclear who just appointed Kallas to support, to defend international world order. Has she appointed herself? Because there are international mechanisms, institutions in place, UN bodies, International Court, UN Security Council. As we know, Kallas does not have any relation to them. As for the International Criminal Court, it is not within the UN structure. It's only for those countries that have ratified the Roman Statute. Russia is not among them. And because of that unconcealed political engagement of the International Criminal Court, of some prosecutors being politically engaged, some countries take a decision to quit the Roman Statute. For example, Hungary, Mali, Niger, these three states. This pseudo-court body, and they failed to provide guarantees of personal security to Netanyahu, who is under the International Criminal Court arrest. Maybe Callas will deal with her own EU members, have a meeting, just consider them, consider their behavior, maybe let them develop their unified stance, and then she will go on to teach others. For example, Polish Prime Minister Sikorski just saying that he is ready to arrest and to provide him to The Hague. So how is the Sikorski statement, how does it correlate with international law? By all the means, he is protecting and supporting the International Criminal Court, this Brussels bureaucracy, despite statement by its own member states, because this structure is an instrument of putting pressure to unfavorable regimes. These totally corrupted, as we now know, bodies, those who pay, they just make orders, they order. And this dossier is a Ukrainian dossier. This case is the most profitable for the International Criminal Court. The justice body that should be just independent, and that's for Callas to comment. It's strange to hear, because I do not want to provide details here, because they have been provided in Russian reports, in profile reports by our ministry. Now I do not want to describe those details during the briefing, but we will post the links. So let her study documents on the affairs in the European Union. She can command there, she can bring order to that, and as far as she is allowed by the EU members, maybe let her just remove the dust somewhere in the European Union to be the master there. But after she brings order there, she can just deal with something else. But first of all, let her deal with her domestic affairs. Thank you very much. One more question, if you allow me. The initiative part you have mentioned today, the recent meeting of the coalition of the willing, with the participation of Zelensky and the British tradition to support Nazis. Can you just provide your assessment for Britain's action in supporting the Ukrainian crisis? Just London is gambling everything on supporting the Ukrainian leadership. It's just some forensic idea. And they remove just all the social, economic problems to the background. Widespread migration, illegal, and not regulated. That is changing the face of Great Britain. It is just changing, and street crime as well, very high rate, Keir Starmer government and the rating of his Labour Party falling. They're just supporting their sponsors on Bankova and supporting them in their anti-Russian policy that is killing the Ukrainian people. They are pushing them towards a dangerous edge. Zelensky has visited Great Britain in October. He was received by Charles III in Windsor Castle, honoring Zelensky. There were parade procedures, as if he came with some historiographical purposes. Obviously, as you have noticed, I think there was a hymn, a ceremonial salute. Maybe artillery munitions used not used during the September stay in Windsor of President Trump. Actually, Zelensky was just invited for some leftover. And the assistance to Kiev regime just forgetting that it's not about some public figures, but about a terrorist cell. London is just supporting the topic of intervention in Ukraine and hindering peaceful settlement for the Kiev regime to carry on with the war, as Boris Johnson used to promote. Now it's transition to a virtual format of the meeting, and London just keeps hopes of the theft of Russian assets, but the British people are not ready for that because it will be catastrophic losses for London City. They just think that someone else will do that. It's just their tactics to provoke and then to say that they are not engaged in it. It's classical tactics of the English politics. It's not just someone patronizing those tactics. It will be paid by London, by common citizens, common British citizens, as it is always the case. They should realize the destructive nature of anti-Russian politics that is fraught with grave consequences for international and regional security. At first, it is not hindering efforts aimed at the settlement of the conflict by eliminating of its root causes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Ria Novosti with us? Yes, Madam Zakharova. Christina Rodriguez, Ria Novosti. We have 2 questions today, if you allow. I will move on to the first question. How would you comment on the information that has appeared in the media that the illegitimate high representatives of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Mr. Schmidt, is soon to leave his post and pass on his duties to someone who will be approved by the UN Security Council? Actually, Mr. Schmidt, he did not occupy any post. He just qualified himself as some representatives. He was not approved by the UN Security Council for this post. He did not have any legitimacy. They're just words, special words. He's just an usurpator that can qualify him. And to pass on his functions, to pass on the functions he does not have, he has never had. He cannot do that, and the post is vacant after Valentin Inzko left the post. Actually, his stay in Bosnia and Herzegovina is just his private business. It has nothing to do with post-conflict settlement with Bosnia and Herzegovina. At least as agreed by the international community, Russia is one of the Dayton Agreement guarantors. Agreement of 1995 supports the elimination of the external protectorate incompatible with the sovereignty of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We stand for the entire responsibility for the fate of the country and its people, equality and equal and respectful dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My second question, if I may. Russia has made considerable efforts to establish the facts of the staged incident in Bucha. As far as I know, in the context of the investigation of this provocation, you have repeatedly sent relevant inquiries to the UN Secretariat. I would like to know how you received any response. As you know, this issue is regularly raised and controlled by Sergei Lavrov. During his contacts with UN officials, including Secretary General Guterres, he not only regularly talks about this, but also conveys the corresponding letters. What is our permanent mission to the United Nations in New York does. We continue to seek a substantive response from the UN Secretariat to Russian inquiries regarding the provocation in Bucha in April 2022. In particular, we insist on the provision of a nominal list of the names of the people whose bodies were shown in the Western media footage, the British in particular, that went around the world. And they were represented as civilians killed in Bucha, and accusations were voiced towards Russia and Russian military. So far, we have seen, only to put it mildly, an evasive reaction from UN officials to proposals for constructive interaction with Moscow. We call on the representatives of the World Organization to abandon the actual connivance with the Ukrainian staged incident. Not only Ukrainian, I mean the western part of Ukraine, which was aimed at discrediting our country. We call upon the UN Secretariat, the UN Secretary General, to hold a thorough and transparent investigation to identify the persons responsible for this monstrous crime of the Kiev regime. The fact that Russia claims this list, this name-by-name list of the people who were misrepresented as victims, we are doing this not only to lift this accusation from us, we are doing this in order to encourage the international community to launch an international investigation, what had happened there, and who had killed those persons, and those who had orchestrated these events in Bucha. The other day, Sergei Lavrov sent another message to UN Secretary General on this topic, and we await their reaction once again. Thank you very much. Izvestia, are you with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We have 2 questions today, if I may. My first question, Trump, in a conversation with journalists, distanced himself from the topic of the seizure of Russian assets by European Union countries to help Ukraine, saying that he's not involved in this. In your opinion, can the statement reason with the leaders of the European Union to stop their gangster actions? The main inspirer of the sanctions pressure on Russia, as is known, was the administration of former U.S. President Biden, with its active support along. And before that, under Obama administration, the Biden was the part of, as a vice president, more than 10 years ago. Obama stated that the Russian economy is in tatters, and they are trying to demolish and to undermine Russian economy again. With its active support alone, peace through strength in the 21st century was adopted in the U.S. in April 2024, containing a mechanism for the confiscation of Russian sovereign assets. The goal was to push, or rather to provoke, other Westerners, primarily the European Union, to confiscate our state reserves. Let me remind you that the sanctions of the European Union of 2014 were adopted under the pressure of the United States of America, and personally, the then Vice President of the Obama administration, Biden, he was the Vice President at that time, he said that that was something he was particularly proud of. He made everything personally to make European Union adopt those sanctions against Russia. Washington, even then, effectively shifted the main burden of losses in the event of the implementation of this venture to the European Union, in whose jurisdiction the largest part of the remaining domestic assets in the West is located. What is happening now is a direct consequence of the fact that the European Union followed the lead of the then White House administration and took a course towards a senseless confrontation with Russia and the unrestrained pumping of the Kiev regime with money and weapons. This led Brussels to its current state of affairs when, to please the political ambitions of individual Euro officials and Russophobes, the European Union risks finally undermining its international reputation as a once reliable economic and investment partner. The current an enviable economic situation in the European Union, it is obvious. It is the matter not of the future, but it is the matter of the present. And this current economic situation, which is the result of the severance of ties with Russia for the EU political elites in power, it seems has not become a lesson. Alas, they also lost their strategic independence when taking crucial and key solutions. And as I have already said, that has not become a lesson to them. They have took a step further towards an abyss. However, the West understands that the theft of our state reserves will not go unanswered. Evidence of this is the continued absence of consensus, as well as within the Group of Seven, on the issue of allocating a reparation loan to Ukraine at the expense of our assets. The real collective responsibility, despite all the slogans about European or the Western solidarity, is not something the European Union is in a hurry to take on. There is no line of those wishing to finance the Kiev regime by issuing common European debt instruments in sight. Instead, there is the usual unseemly squabble around money, in this case someone else's. For this association where everyone defends their own interests and where those who have nothing special to lose in this situation, they shout the loudest. They have nothing to lose, as we know. This perseverance is worth of better application, and the EU members continue to finance both the Kiev regime and their own and foreign defense concerns, are increasingly reminiscent of a company that has been partying for too long in a restaurant, and they understand that they have been brought the bill for several times, but they have no money and they don't know how to cancel it. Once again, we can warn the European Union from the theft of sovereign Russian assets. It will not get additional funds, but serious long-term problems. Thank you, Madam Zakharova. My second question. What actions on the part of the United States became the reason for the denunciation of the plutonium disposition agreement? As you know, on October 27 this year, the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, signed Federal Law number 379 on the denunciation by the Russian Federation of the agreement between the government of the Russian Federation and the government of the United States of America on the disposition of plutonium, declared as plutonium no longer required for defense purposes, its handling and cooperation in this field, and the protocols to this agreement. This agreement has lost its relevance, its effect, and the protocols to it were suspended by Russia back in 2016, this was caused by the unfriendly actions of the United States and Washington's attempts to change the procedure for the disposition of plutonium prescribed in the agreement without obtaining consent for this from the Russian side. Not one of the conditions outlined by Russia in 2016 for the resumption of this agreement has been met, and this is a clear fact. We qualified these actions as destructive And these destructive actions contributed to the general aggravation of the military-political situation in the world. Moreover, the United States unilaterally abandoned the strategy for the disposition of plutonium agreed upon with the Russian side and resumed the production of plutonium pits for its nuclear warheads. As a consequence, Russia decided to complete the process of terminating cooperation with the United States within the framework of the agreement. This is a signal that any attempts to undermine Russia's military-political interests and to unilaterally revise the terms of international agreements concluded between our countries will receive a firm and consistent rebuff. We have repeatedly mentioned, but if you ask us to do so, I repeated this. Thank you very much. Archie, are you with us? Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Good afternoon, colleagues. So we have two questions today. Donald Tusk stated that Ukraine has the right to attack targets associated with Russia anywhere in Europe. He made this statement shortly after a Polish court rejected Germany's request for the extradition of a Ukrainian diver accused of involvement in the bombing of the Nord Stream gas pipelines. How would you comment on such rhetoric from Warsaw and the situation surrounding the investigation of the sabotage in the gas pipelines? As for the investigation of the terrorist attack on the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 gas pipelines over the past 3 years, the German authorities have not fulfilled any of our requests for legal assistance and have rejected the initiative of Russia and a number of other countries to conduct an independent, open and objective international investigation under the auspices of the United Nations. The investigation into the circumstances of the pipeline bombing, despite the assurances of the German authorities of their intention to find the culprits, has grotesquely turned into support for the Kiev terrorist regime. And of course, the position of Poland is even more shameful. The Polish authorities demonstrate complete disregard for the norms of international law and directly express encouragement for acts of terrorism if only it harms Russia. From their point of view, you have already mentioned Tusk. He is a prime minister, after all, not an observer who can talk nonsense and bear no responsibility. He is the key figure in his country, entitled with a particular mandate and particular responsibility which it entails. He wrote on social media, I quote, "The problem with Nord Stream is not that it was blown up, but that it was built." I'm wondering, I'm just curious. And those people who die in terrorist attacks, is he going to have the same linguistic phrasing towards them? The Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Sikorsky, after the decision of the District Court in Warsaw to refuse to extradite the Ukrainian Vladimir Zhuravlov, suspected of the bombing, said that he feels pride in the Polish court, which did not consider this sabotage against the invader a crime, and this is a direct quote. A very curious logic. So, we see if a grouping, a band, an organization declares, or just for itself, considers Poland to be an invader or a country that does not fit into regular norms, everything that this group will be doing on the territory of Poland will not be considered as a crime. What can we say about this, and how should we treat this? For our part, we will do everything to prevent this unprecedented terrorist act against an object of cross-border underwater civilian infrastructure from being swept under the carpet with all our resources and opportunities. My second question, if I may. You know, there is another point in this regard. Speaking about the statement made by Tusk and other Polish politicians, let alone the moral and ethical part of the question, there is a legal part of the question. This is a terrorist act. They can consider this to be nothing wrong. They can consider this to be a positive thing. This is another story. This is a different story. But indeed, in reality, there is a violation of legitimacy and the right. There used to be the facility of infrastructure. There were contractors, and all this was demolished after all. This all requires investigation. Perhaps, following the investigation, those who ordered and those who perpetrated this action, I now quote, the Polish representatives, perhaps then now the Polish government will give them an award. But let's find them first and foremost. I suggest that we should find them. We should identify the perpetrators and then give the Polish government an opportunity to honor the perpetrators, the so-called heroes. Speaking about those who ordered this terrorist attack, Biden himself said that he would do everything possible to suspend this infrastructure project from functioning. This statement was a public confirmation of his intention. We should identify those who perpetrated, who sponsored and supervised all those happening, and afterwards each and every legal entity, international organization will give corresponding assessments of those activities. Some would say that those are criminals, and Warsaw perhaps will award and honor those perpetrators. Just do not get in the way of finding these so-called Polish heroes. Let's find them first and foremost. My second question, if I may.
The mayor of the Armenian city of Gyumri, Verdan Gukasyan, detained on the 21st of October on the allegations of corruption. There is a new criminal case initiated against him, this time for statements in favor of Armenia being part of the allied state with Russia. They are regarded as calls for seizing power and overthrowing the constitutional order. How can you comment on that? I would repeat that the case of Verdan Gukasyan, our position is that it is a domestic affair of Armenia and its people, but what I cannot but share its astonishment, the privileges of cooperation with Russia. Someone just regarded them as calls for overthrowing the constitutional order in the country, and it's about the accession to the European Union. And in April 2025, a law was adopted in Armenia on the start of this accession process. Maybe let them just qualify this action somehow. It's just restriction of sovereignty, and it's said directly in that law. There is no different reading of that. The accession to the European Union, they should abandon part of their sovereignty. For example, in taking foreign policy decisions, they demand their candidates, even at initial stage, just not member countries, but candidates, to sanction those who the European Union has qualified as its enemy, and so on and so forth. Of course, it's abandoning the sovereignty in the sphere of law, monetary policy, migration regime, and many, many other spheres. But for some reason, they do not mention any criminal liability, criminal cases for supporting EU aspirations. There is no such cases in Armenia, but if there is already such a practice in place, like regarding the statements of some public figures for calls for deprivation, alleged deprivation of sovereignty in Armenia, so other calls, other statements should also be considered, because we are convinced that It's just normal. It's healthy practice, cooperation with neighboring states in any democratic society. And I hope that the legislative legal bodies of Armenia will avoid politicized approach in their duties. As Verdan Gukasan said, I have written down a quote. Armenia being within the allied state with Russia, because Armenia is member of CSTO, other alliances with Russia, have mentioned not only problems but bonuses that the Armenian people receive. Is it normal statements or not normal? I would like to understand that as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Xinhua with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. In November in Shanghai, there will be the 8th China International Import Expo. What are your expectations of the coming expo and the participation of Russia in it? What do you think about cooperation, taking into account the growth in sanctions, unilateral restrictions, and other trends in global economy? Thank you. You're talking about the 8th. Could you please repeat once again? Import Expo. Yes, I have understood. This year, despite any restrictions, these stricter measures by Washington regarding tariffs, other restrictions, sanctions, despite them, we just record the growth in trade with China because widespread export expansion. The trade turnover growth is a consequence of the Chinese production sector growth and redirection of goods to alternative export markets just give us some ground to forecast the positive trends staying. This is a key role in preserving stability worldwide. The 8th Expo is just a major trade forum. We know about the demands in China, demand for our agricultural products, high-tech equipment for Russian businessmen. Business circles, this platform will provide additional opportunities for demonstration of their achievement, expanding business links with China, looking for reliable partners, accessing international markets. So we hope that this event will succeed. Thank you very much. Is News.ru with us? Yes, we are here. We have 2 questions. Hungary has initiated the creation of tripartite alliance with Slovakia and the Czech Republic. It's about an attempt to protect from the US pressure because Washington is calling upon abandoning Russian hydrocarbons. Do you think this alliance has any chance to succeed? Yes. Actually, there is no legally binding, legally formed alliance. It's about possible coordination of Bratislava, Budapest, and Prague in protection of their national interests before the European bureaucracy that has become an obvious threat for the EU member countries. We actually value the pragmatic approach, and the sovereign approach is appearing on major international issues. I cannot hear. You have no sound on, I think. There is no sound. Yes, now can you hear me? Yes, perfectly. My second question. How is the process going on of the return to Russia?
Во-первых, по линии профильных ведомств двух стран ведется предметный диалог в целях скорейшего возвращения российских граждан на родину. Второй момент, мы уже сообщали, в Россию вернулись наши журналисты, руководители информационного агентства «Спутник Азербайджан» Игорь Картавых, он вернулся 19 октября, и шеф-редактор Евгений Белоусов, он вернулся 25 октября. Беспокойство, конечно, вызывает ситуация со студентом из Санкт-Петербурга, Дмитрием Федоровым. Есть многочисленные сигналы о неудовлетворительном состоянии его здоровья. И я хочу подчеркнуть, что посольство России в Баку вчера повторно направило азербайджанской стороне запрос на встречу с российским гражданином и на предоставление ему квалифицированной медицинской помощи. Консульский доступ, к сожалению, пока не получен. Американского председательства в 2023 году и принимать содержательные, такие действительно хорошо, глубоко проработанные документы. Поступательно развивается и проектная деятельность форума. Она неизменно направлена на решение разнообразных практических задач, которые способствуют повышению региональной связанности. И в этом смысле АТЭС действительно способен соединять. На АТЭСовской площадке плотно взаимодействуем с Китаем, с другими конструктивными партнерами, делаем ставку на углубление экономической интеграции, снятие всех необоснованных барьеров, последовательно выступаем против использования экономики как оружия, совместными усилиями препятствуем попытке отдельных западных делегаций привнести в повестку форума непрофильные политические сюжеты. И готовы, конечно, к продолжению этой работы в ходе предстоящего в 2026 году председательства КНР в форуме АТЭС и настроены на созидательное сотрудничество, взаимную поддержку практических инициатив.
Спасибо. И второй вопрос, Мария Владимировна.
Да, конечно.
26 октября Россия заявила об успешных испытаниях крылатой ракеты с ядерным двигателем «Буревестник». И на фоне переноса встречи лидеров России и США, утверждения нового пакета санкций ЕС и проведения ядерных учений НАТО, чем была обусловлена необходимость обнародовать информацию об успешных испытаниях «Буревестника», именно в этот момент какой сигнал этим шагом направляется?
Знаете, информация, я думаю, что вы, конечно, читали и слышали об успешных испытаниях системы «Буревестник», была обнародована в ходе доклада начальника генерального штаба господина Герасимова президенту Российской Федерации по итогам тренировки стратегических ядерных сил. Такие многосложные и такие комплексно готовящиеся учения, включая испытания перспективных образцов вооружения, носят плановый характер. Они прорабатываются фундаментально. Сигнал в таких случаях, как правило, один и тот же. Россия на системной основе предпринимает шаги по поддержанию эффективности и надежности национальных сил и средств стратегического сдерживания, их технологической зрелости и адекватности существующим угрозам. Цель, безусловно, обеспечение постоянной готовности нашей страны защищать свои коренные и жизненно важные интересы, а также демонстрация любому вероятному противнику, что в ответ на потенциальную агрессию с его стороны Россия в состоянии дать гарантированный и твердый отпор. Что касается систем, подобных буревестнику, то, как уже неоднократно заявлялось российским руководством, их разработка носит вынужденный характер и происходит в целях поддержания стратегического баланса. В частности, нашей стране приходится реагировать на все более дестабилизирующие действия натовцев в сфере, ну вот в частности, противоракетной обороны.
Спасибо.
Спасибо вам. С нами ли Украина.ру?
Здравствуйте, Мария Владимировна, Анна Черкасова, издание «Украина.ру». У нас один вопрос сегодня. Западные СМИ активно педалируют тему отказа госкомпаний Китая и России закупать нефть российских компаний Роснефть и Лукойл из-за санкций США. Как вы считаете, насколько экономика, точнее угроза санкций экономики стран может оказаться сильнее политических связей России с Индией и Китаем?
Вы знаете, мне кажется, не стоит противоставлять вот эти сферы. С каждым из наших международных партнеров, включая Китай, Индию, мы совместно выстраиваем взаимовыгодное сотрудничество и с политической, и с экономической точек зрения. Следуем такому принципу при любых обстоятельствах, в том числе и даже неблагоприятных. В частности, Россия на протяжении многих лет удерживает первое место по объему поставок нефти в Китай. Российско-китайское партнерство в области энергетики носит стратегический характер, не подвержено сиюминутным веяниям и не зависит от внешнего. Они намерены продолжать и развивать, углублять сотрудничество на благо народов наших стран.
Спасибо, Мария Владимировна.
С нами, вам спасибо. С нами ли Рейтер?
Мария Владимировна, добрый вечер. У нас будет всего один вопрос, который касается недавних заявлений новый премьер-министр Японии Санае Такаити, которая на прошлой неделе сказала, что политика японского правительства заключается в том, чтобы решить проблему северных территорий и заключить мирный договор с Россией. Вот насколько реально заключение такого договора с точки зрения России, есть ли предпосылки для его заключения и какие условия должны быть выполнены для того, чтобы такой договор мог быть заключен?
Ну, конечно, хочется задать вопрос, почему вас это волнует, но, может быть, какая-то островная солидарность, я не знаю. Ну, хорошо, пусть это останется риторическим вопросом. Вы знаете, честно говоря, я не увидела ничего нового в этих высказываниях. Уточнила у экспертов, они тоже ничего не увидели нового в этих высказываниях. И, в принципе, ничего нет нового в политике японского правительства в отношении России. Мы не услышали в ходе выступления в парламенте премьер-министра Такаити. Ничего там нового не прозвучало. Вы знаете, у нас есть наш принципиальный подход. Вот он как бы тоже, наверное, прозвучит не ново. Мы неоднократно об этом заявляли и раньше. Путь к возобновлению диалога с Японией откроется только после деятельного отказа Токио от антироссийского курса, нацеленного на нанесение нашей стране и ее гражданам ущерба, как там придумали, да, что нам будет какое-то там поражение, ущерб наноситься. Вот от этого они должны отказаться. Это к вопросу о предпосылках или о, так сказать, тенденциях, атмосферах и так далее. Потому что ведь именно такая недружественная линия завела двустороннее сотрудничество в тупик. Но линия эта была недружественная и тупиковая с японской стороны, не с нашей.
Спасибо вам большое.
Да, видите, но я единственное смею предположить, что, возможно, японским журналистам запретили японское руководство или японские власти задавать вопрос. Возможно, вы, так сказать, за них делаете их работу. Тогда пусть делятся своими зарплатой.
Спасибо.
Спасибо вам. С нами Лиана Далу.
Да, здравствуйте, Мария Владимировна.
Здравствуйте.
У нас сегодня вопрос. Недавно министр иностранных дел России Сергей Лавров сказал, что Россия готова предоставить гарантии безопасности, гарантии ненападения странам НАТО. Не могли бы вы подробнее рассказать, о чем идет речь и идет ли тут речь о заключении какого-то нового соглашения?
Да, могу. Сейчас, одну секунду. У нас оперативно поступают новости. Да. Так, мы исходим из необходимости формирования архитектуры безопасности на всем пространстве Евразии, а не только в отдельных регионах нашего континента. Собственно, как и сказал министр иностранных дел России Сергей Лавров в своем выступлении 28 октября на Минской конференции, международной конференции в Минске по евразийской безопасности. Безопасность либо будет всеобщей, либо ее не будет вообще. Считаем, что евразийская безопасность